Hello, welcome to this episode of EMS Now Up Close. I'm Eric with EMS Now. Joining me today is Taylor Wagan. He's the COO of Cetec ERP. I've certainly interviewed a few people from Cetec before, but never Taylor. So, Taylor, thanks for agreeing to come on and be my latest victim today. I appreciate the opportunity to get to know you a little better.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Glad to be here.
Good. Hey, listen, why don't we begin by introduce yourself and your company in brief, if you would, please.
Okay, my name is Taylor Wagan. I am, as you mentioned, COO here at Cetec ERP. We are an ERP company focused on SMB, so small and medium-sized
Yeah.
manufacturers, which for us means people from just kind of getting off the ground floor. We have companies as small as 2 users, all the way up to kind of approaching the Fortune 1000. So somewhere in that space, which is pretty broad, but it means your problems are somewhat going to be similar operationally, and we have a pretty good feel for that. And we focus on companies of that size who are doing manufacturing, and then within a subset of that, we have a very distinct focus within the electronics industry. So we deal with a lot of specific problems that contract manufacturers, electronics manufacturers, and assemblers deal with. So that's kind of an area where we play a lot.
Cool. And what I recall from previous interviews and what I know about CTEC, you really kind of pride yourself on being kind of cloud native and designed for ease of use.
Yeah, ease. We talk about internally. We talk about having a lot of breadth. Covering a lot of features that people need because there's similarity, and you don't want to have to try to tie a bunch of different systems together.
Yeah.
I know there's some debate where some people think like you want to actually have like the best system for each thing, and you want to be able to swap them around, and then you end up with this massive IT project and endless programming. And so our play is no, you really want breadth of system, a single place that has all your data, and then you need depth of feature within there to cover all the various needs and situations that you can't anticipate that you're going to run into. And then just as important as that for us is ease of use. So it needs to be intuitive enough that people can figure it out and use it without great pain. Um, that usually means cloud deploy for us, where you sign up and we'll have an instance created for you. You're off and running. There are some situations mostly related to either really terrible internet in a rural location or some sort of defense requirement where you need that to be resident, and we do that.
Mm, okay. Very cool. Well, thanks for that distinction. That helps. So what I wanted to talk to you, I know one of the big challenges, you guys work with a lot of EMS companies, the contract manufacturers, as you said. The challenge of cost capture within EMS has been around probably since they were first created,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it's become a real pain point within these companies. Kind of describe how you view that challenge and how CTech kind of approaches it with the solutions you provide.
Good question. So cost capture is it's first of all, it's just harder than I think it maybe one of those problems that like you can look at it and think like, okay, shouldn't be that hard, and then the reality of it is just it's very difficult.
Mhm.
I was with a roundtable a couple weeks ago talking to some industry people about like how they do cost capture and where it is, where does it go sideways?
Yeah.
And and they were quite frankly really struggling with the issue. And there's a couple ways to think about it. So the first overview, aside from acknowledging this is a hard problem, is if you're going to scope it, there are a couple different buckets that you're going to have as an EMS company. You're going to have obviously material, which, in the COVID material apocalypse that has been the past few years, material costs were all over the map, and even getting it was a problem. So material cost is very, very obvious. The second one is labor. Labor cost, everybody knows about. Very few people actually track it.
Hmm.
We'll talk about that in a minute when I circle back to difficulties. Then you have overhead, which is what's the load around that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have things that are outsourced processes. Like if you have a build and it's going to go into something medical and you have sterilization, or maybe there's a million different outsourced processes that can come up. You need to be able to grab all of those costs as part of your order and figure out what they are. And the
Hmm.
curse for a manufacturer, especially a contract manufacturer in EMS, is you've set your resale at the time of quoting. Really, you send a quote, You get a PO, your resale is locked. That's all you're going to make. But your costs are going to accrue the whole way through. So when you
Right.
set your resale, you're going against estimated cost. This is what we think it's going to cost us. And then, somebody drops a couple of them and something happens and, oh, we can't find that part. Your material costs are going up. Your labor costs are going up. By the time you're done, what you had estimated might be very different than what you actually have. And that is just the reality of the situation. So one of our goals, system-wise, is to give people an easy way to grab those costs. That they can actually accurately track them, so they know per job, per cell, per human, per machine, per whatever. You can, once you grab them, you can do all kinds of reporting to actually know what they are. And I think I would say the single biggest mistake that we see, if I was going to offer advice for a company agnostic of ERP system or however they're tracking costs, is to track your time, especially your labor time, as well as you can at point of actual use.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers of times that I've seen that really fail in a big way, where people will have, like a through hole step and they have estimated that it's going to be 10 minutes and it turns out to be 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have been selling this thing like crazy, thinking they're making money. And in reality, they're losing every cell they have.
Yeah.
So being able to track that in EMS, the more automated it is, the more you can do it on a pick and place and just run it down the line, the less of a concern that is. But as soon as you start into human touch things, you really want to, keep your eye on that one. So
Do you make a distinction then in the tool between direct and indirect labor?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. As the accounting rules require such things. So
Yes, they do, don't they? Okay. And you mentioned the overhead because that's usually the most complex chart of accounts in accounting, right? Is under that overhead piece.
yes.
And I think from my previous experiences, that's where a lot of people miss things, right? And when they're assessing their outsourcing costs, they're saying, "Oh, we got to include that." And then you bring somebody from the accounting department in and they say, "Oh yeah, we
Yeah.
burden you with all these things," right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
But being able to track, things depending on where you are, and what your equipment looks like, power might be a very significant piece of overhead that you should be tracking,
Oh yeah.
right? And that really needs to make its way out of an expense utilities account
Yeah.
into like a COGS account. And you can do that monthly. You could do that, like you could just dump that on finance and say, do finance things and, make sure my
Yeah.
books are reasonably accurate. But if you can have a system do that for you automatically and then say, okay, well, when we quote this job, we should know this is actually what it's going to cost us. That's obviously beneficial. So
Yeah. No, that's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I think it's a great topic. And a great, shouldn't say topic, a great issue that the EMS have struggled with for a long time. So it's good to hear that these are being addressed. So what about other operational pain points though that you help address? Are there others?
oh gosh. Yeah, so there's
That's a loaded
yeah.
question, right?
uh, there are a lot of things. Going from, like, we have an anecdote in company that when you walk into a company, by the time when you go to do consulting to help them do the switch, you're there for the first time. You go into the door and you sign the little book. By the time you make it to the conference room, a relative feel for how sophisticated they are
Yeah.
by just that. And so then that changes what it is that you're going to be talking about, from like, hey, how much money are you leaving around, with WIP that's misdeployed, and so you're overspending on material, or traceability. How are they doing traceability? Are they just doing lot code traceability by writing stuff down? Does the system break it down for them? Could they do a recall? Can they do a full traceability and move into some of those, higher margin business opportunities? Is that hard to do?
Mhm.
When they pick material, is it smooth? Is it efficient? Is it random? Or is this a training exercise now where you need somebody, Martha, who's been in the warehouse for 30 years? She's the only one who knows where things are.
Right.
Uh, all of that stuff just trees, and you move into, and like you start looking at quality, like what's their quality process? What's an NCR look like? Is that a painful thing or an easy thing? Do you have inspections? So when the customer says, hey, we need this inspected, I need to know who did it, and I need all, and you're like, is that when sales is getting all this stuff, like, is production like, hey, we got you, this is no big deal? Or is it like, this is a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a million. There's similar problems.
Yeah.
And I guess this is kind of like an ERP case, for like what does software provide you? It provides you with the structure, like the process for these
Good.
things. Uh, the little stuff, like an ISO auditor comes in and they want to justify why they're there, and so they grab a
Mhm.
random tool and say like, when was this last calibrated?
Yeah.
And everybody kind of looks around, panics. I don't know. Like if you show the auditor, oh, that our software platform has a spot for that. Here it is. They tell you that, and then the auditor is like, okay, this is going to be a
Yeah.
breeze. This is going to be a
Right.
breeze. Everything's in the software. No big deal. We don't have like, it's that kind of thing. We're
And so
anticipating what.
that, you're speaking to, as I hear you speaking, it's great because the ERP just simply has all these categories that people may not have been thinking about, right, as they're going into this. And it's like, ooh, what's this? Okay. And it's just a matter of putting the data in there, right? Being aware that you need it, capture it, keep it there, update it as needed because things do change, right? So,
Yeah,
and hope, are there prompts for that as well? Are there prompts for missing data? How does that work?
good question. It depends on the area. So there are a lot of things that you can configure to fit your own specific process.
Hmm.
In which case, that's like that fits who you are. And there are other things where this is going to change. And in general, one of our biggest concerns is being able to keep everybody on an upgrade path.
Okay.
Um, the ERP world of yore, it was like like you'd have to go and get the new CD and install it. It was like going from like Windows 3.1 to 95 to whatever, and you're always like having to go buy this new thing and install it. And now the way that we tend to operate, like when I load Amazon, I don't need to like install a new Amazon. It's there, right?
Yeah.
I just use it. We're trying to move as much as we can that way while still allowing people to have their heavy configurations to fit their stuff.
Mhm.
So we do basically quarterly releases, and we tell them, hey, here's everything that's in this new release that you can review and play with and change, and it'll be in your environment in 2 weeks, so they can go and do all that, see what's
Okay.
new, touch the shiny toy. And
Yeah, and figure that out. Yeah, that is one of the things that I recall from previous interviews that it's always everybody's on the same edition, right? There's not all these different versions. It's always the same. Listen, one thing that has been challenging this last year for many companies and are tariffs.
oh,
And I know that you guys introduced kind of a feature to help with that. Uh, Speak a little bit about that, if you would.
okay. Tariffs are have been very, very hard for our customer base. Basically knowing what the rules are and then having a way to track that. Historically a lot of taxes operate on a part, and then where you're selling it from or to, and it's relatively simple. Now the tariff charges are being passed all the way through the supply chain, and so you may find yourself 3 steps down from the original importer or manufacturer, and you're receiving a tariff charge around this that you also want to pass on to the next step. So you're not the one in this massive chain holding the bag.
Right.
So what you have to be able to do then is identify potentially, hey, this part came from what country and which assemblies is it used on and what is that effective rate? And so we basically took our whole normal tax structure and expanded that to kind of scope down into a BOM and look for country of origins. And you can define these rules and say, okay, if country of origin is China and it's used here, that part is going to have, this rate, or generic for that is going to be this rate. And so then we can kind of accumulate that, present it as a tax, and allow you to collect it. So you're not the guy with the hot potato at the end of the dance there.
Yeah, no, precisely right. Because that is this dynamic situation, right? That is ever changing, and you got to kind of stay up on it. And I know it's given fits to a lot of people in the industry. So
Yeah, it's a hard problem. It's been a very hard problem.
yeah, no, it's good to know that you guys have that as one of the features. Are there any other new features or enhancements that I didn't ask about that you care to mention?
Yeah, I mean, our dev lineup is never ending and interesting. We're spending a lot of time on automation. One of our guides for like how we are thinking about using AI internally
Mhm.
is making sure that when we talk about AI in our own world, that we're really thinking about not just AI, but specifically we're thinking about automation. So we
Mm,
don't want AI for its own sake. What we really want is tools that will automate processes that can be to drive greater efficiency for people.
mm,
So we have a couple things that we're doing there, which do happen to use AI, but the benefit is not that they use AI; it's that they automate things. On the incoming side, when you do receiving, when you
mhm.
get like a packing slip and a COC from your manufacturer, we have introduced a feature that basically lets you throw that on a scanner and it just goes off to the computer, and the computer will automatically save it and attach it to the receipt. So anytime that gets used, we can automatically grab it and present it to you. And that uses a ton of different technologies to make that happen.
Right.
Same on the AP side. When you get a bill from your vendor, we
Mhm.
will now you can just direct that email, and we will automatically scan it, create all that internal bill for you, and approve it for payment, or say, hey, something looks a little off. You should go review it, and try to automate as much of that
Good.
inbound process as we
Yeah.
can. So I'm
Oh,
excited
excellent.
to.
No, that sounds excellent. I'm not in manufacturing, but I could use something like that some days, right? So that has great application. Um, Before I let you go, I did want to mention that you have launched a podcast there at CTech. I think it's called Build Your Way. This was last fall. You launched that. Kind of tell us about that, the type of topics that you're covering, and really who the intended audience is.
Build Your Way is a podcast specifically for small and medium sized manufacturers.
Okay.
So we talk to mostly people who are directly in the space. So some actual operators, sometimes people who are providing services or tools for that are interesting, and we just try to talk about what problems people are facing in that manufacturing world, and what other people are doing, and what's creative, what's happening, and
Mhm.
hopefully useful.
Good. Now, people are interested, is it on the normal kind of
It
podcast
is. It's
forums?
on
Or
Spotify and YouTube. I think you can get there from our website, maybe even our LinkedIn
good.
socials. So yeah,
Okay.
it's everywhere.
So Build Your Way is what it's called. Go look it up for your next long hike out by the lake or whatever it is, right? That's when I listen to podcasts, so that's I assume everyone does. Um, Taylor, thanks for your time today. It's great to get to know you. Thank you for the insights. You clearly know the product, and we were talking before. You're still doing coding and everything there, so you're very much involved in everything that's happening, and we appreciate the insights today.
Thank you, Eric.
Take care. Thanks.